My name is Brian Cushing. I'm the Program Director at Historic Locust Grove, and we are going to do another session of using historic recipes in our kitchens from home since that's where we are right now. We're not doing anything from the hearth kitchen because, like we said before, just like any other kitchen, when we fire it up, the people smell smoke and they see the activity, and so they want to stop in and congregate and see what's going on, which is usually exactly what we want, but not right now. So one thing that I thought about was a lot of people get nervous about using very old recipes in their kitchens at home because they don't look like the recipes that we have now. But we're going to work through another one of these recipes, and I'll show you with just a little bit of practice, maybe a little bit of understanding of how they talked about things, using these old recipes in your own kitchen and getting a taste of history while you're there at home is perfectly doable. So the book that we're going to be working from today, it's called The Complete Housewife, or Accomplished Gentlewoman's Companion by Eliza Smith. It's a 4th edition published originally in London in 1730, and this has been reprinted by our friends over at Townsend's, along with just about every other cookbook that you could think of from the 18th century. So if you're interested in this or any cookbook from the 18th century, go check out their website, and you can probably find it on there. This is going to be a fricassee of chicken on page 20, and you might be thinking 1730, isn't that a little bit old for Locust Grove? Well, yes, a little bit, but William Cron, who designed Locust Grove, actually designed it in a style largely that was going out of fashion. So his house is a little bit old-fashioned. If you check out our blog, you'll see how his clothes are up to date. So apparently William Cron went with what he liked, and this recipe for a fricassee of chicken caught my eye, so I'm going to follow his example and just go for it. Recipes for fricassee of chicken, though, are still appearing in cookbooks that were published when Locust Grove was built and during the early years at Locust Grove. So here's what you're going to need for the recipe. You're going to need 1 chicken. Now this one I got from a local farmer here who actually is delivering fresh meat to people's houses, completely contact-free. You leave a cooler out front and he drops it in. It's like the meat fairy came, and it's the fowl. I don't know if it's pronounced fall or fowl. It's F-A-U-L, Family Farm. Look them up. They got great stuff. Now this chicken is a little bit under 3 pounds. Most of the chickens that you find in the grocery store are going to be quite a bit bigger. Sometimes that's even problematic with historic recipes, how big they're breeding chickens these days. It's just kind of unnatural. And so you might have to calculate or recalculate a few things for a bigger chicken. You're going to need some butter, some chicken broth, some white wine, nutmeg, that's for you, John Townsend, pepper, salt. It calls for a bunch of sweet herbs. There's some mint in the garden right now, so we've got some mint here, and then that's some dried basil. The recipe calls for echallots. If you're in the grocery store, those will be called shallots. 2 or 3 anchovies. There's Pilkington the cat again. He was demanding an anchovy, so he's experimenting with his own little portion here. Oh, there he goes. Some eggs. My new favorite word, sippets. A sippet is a slice of bread. This particular bread came from Q&A Sweet Treats here in LaGrange. They also have worked out a very genius contactless pickup for nice fresh bread, and some slices of lemon. The first thing we have to do is to half boil the chicken. So I have a pot of boiling water here, about enough to cover about 3/4 of the chicken. So I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in. A little bit of the lid on. The consensus online for boiling a chicken is if you have around a 4-pound chicken, then you need to boil it for about an hour, hour and a half, get it to an internal temperature of 165 degrees. So make your adjustments based on how big your chicken is and cut that in half to half boil it. This one is small enough. I'm only going to leave him in there for about 20 minutes because there is quite a bit of cooking left that happens after the chicken is boiled. We're waiting on the chicken to boil. Let's go ahead and get these shallots peeled and sliced up. There we go. Okay, now our chicken is half boiled. And remember, you just want to half boil it. You don't want to cook it all the way through. And the next thing we got to do is cut it up. Now you can skip this step, of course, if you're using chicken pieces instead of a whole chicken. And I'm just going to go ahead and admit here that I am not the best practiced at cutting up whole chickens. I can make it happen, but if it's not something that you've done before, you probably want to go and find another video at this point that could give you some more reliable pointers. So we've got the chicken cut up. The next step is to melt butter in a frying pan for frying. And guys, they did not hold back on the butter in the 18th century, so we'll just start with a stick and see where that gets us. Okay, that's nice and melted and hot. Now we're going to put our pieces of chicken in and fry them up, and this is where most of the rest of the cooking of the chicken should happen.
Hi guys!
Alright, there is our chicken fried in butter. We're going to set that to the side. And the next direction is to wash your pan because we're going to use this again for the next step. Okay, so our pan is clean and it's back on the stove, and now I think this is the part that scares people because there are no proportions given for the next part, but it's kind of a chance to experiment, use a little bit of personality, a little bit of judgment. If you don't get it right the first time, don't go to a COVID-19 party and you'll probably live to see another day and try again. So here's my tips with this. We've got our pan here. For the broth, we're just going to pretty much put in about how much we think looks like we want to stew the size chicken that we have in. And so I've got a 2-pound, 32-ounce box of broth here. Whole thing looks pretty good. Okay, white wine is the next thing we add. And just to measure, let's see. I added a cup. We'll see how it goes. Okay, put in your chopped shallots. Your anchovies, sweet herbs. I chopped up those, I took the mint off of the stalks and chopped it up. And of course our basil, you can hardly have too much basil. Salt. And pepper. And so it says we stew this up over a slow fire and let it boil a bit. So we're going to turn the stove to about medium. Start mixing it up and we'll see where we get. Almost forgot, gotta grate the nutmeg over it. Okay, in between shots I've been playing around with the temperature a little bit. I brought it up to a boil, brought it back down to a simmer, let it cook for a little bit, and we've got a nice low boil here. The next thing that we're directed to do in the recipe is to beat it up and let it thicken with butter and eggs. So I'm gonna start with half a stick of butter. Let that melt, and let's see how 2 eggs does for us. Butter's just about melted. We'll put in the eggs. When you put those eggs in, you want to be whisking the mixture very briskly and add them gradually. I had a moment a second ago in between shots where I got more worried about the camera than the cooking, and I wound up with a little bit of an egg drop soup situation. So be sure to avoid that. I had to spring into action and fix it, but I think we're going to be okay. So just be sure that you add those eggs gradually and that you are whisking before they even hit there and get them really well combined. And now we're just simmering it slowly and waiting for it to thicken up a little bit. During that time I did add a third egg, and it does seem to be thickening up. The recipe says to add the chicken and toss it together. I am going to put the chicken in and let it cook together for a minute. Okay, reduce the heat, just let that cook together for a second. We're going to lightly toast our sippets, or little slices of bread. It's not in the instructions, but it sounds good, and there was some thought in the 18th century that just eating untoasted bread was unhealthy. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so the last instructions were to serve it over your sippets, or your bread, which I toasted lightly, and then put a couple of slices of lemon on top. This seems like a good one. I mean, you just have the same Chardonnay that I put into the dish itself. Squeeze out all of that lemon juice and see how we did. Miss Eliza Smith in 1730 knew what she was doing. I will say I like this quite a bit better than the last one we did. It's just a wonderful mingling of the chicken and the butter and the wine and everything, and all the spices and everything. Of course, the nutmeg and all is a very distinctive kind of 18th century flavor, characteristic of a lot of that stuff. So this is something I'll be trying again. Honestly, I've been trying to get around to this for 15 years. My first year of doing Revolutionary War stuff, I was at an event at the Cincinnati Museum Center, and it was kind of like a collection of demos, and people were, and there was a group of people who were doing cooking, and they served some chicken fricassee, and it was just, I thought it was one of the best things I'd ever had in my life, and this does not disappoint at all. The big thing is, remember to get those, to really be whisking those eggs as you're putting them in. I did get a little bit of separation here, but it does not seem to have affected the flavor. So I hope you enjoy this if you try it. It's a little taste of the 18th century, and stay with us. We're going to keep on coming to you remotely as long as we can't see you in person at Locust Grove. So thanks, and be safe and healthy out there. Keeping Pilkington off the table would really just be more stress for everybody. Why even bother with that? Look at this guy.